Attention all Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn radio listeners. The Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast brings you the best in East Coast esoterica on the first of every month. Together, we can keep it growing by sharing the show on social media, subscribing to the show wherever you may be listening to it from, and by leaving feedback about your favorite episodes. John certainly needs a friend like you to help make his dreams come true, minus the alien abduction dreams. That is not cool at all. The Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast. Always available, always free, always odd.
It's the odd to Newfoundland. Ghostly greetings from your host, Jonathan. Mysteries, ghosts, monsters and lore. East Coast esoterica and so much more. If it's odd to you, friend, it's on the Odd to Newfoundland.
Ghostly greetings from the oldest city in North America. I'm your host, John Mallard, bringing you the best in East Coast esoterica. You, my friends, have stumbled upon the Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast for the month of March 2019. Welcome to my show. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I'll never miss the opportunity to tell you guys you're wonderful. You're a masterpiece. You're beautifully made. Important to people because you're important to me. Highly favored by your creator, whether that is a god or by the law of averages and physics working in tandem. You're thirsty for knowledge and addicted to wonder. You, my friend, are an oddball. And here on this show, you're family, and we are one. This is episode 68 of the Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast, your monthly paranormal variety show. Thank you so very much for taking the time to download this show. I know we're all busy. Life kind of gets in the way. Just got to throw this out there to you. If you're taking the time today, thanks so very much. Do me a favor. Don't drink and drive on this Paddy's Day when it comes up. Try to avoid it. Have your green beer and then call a green cab, will you? Can you do that for me? That'd be really, really helpful. I'll tell you what else would be really, really helpful. Leave me a comment. A little something on the show notes. Either on Facebook or maybe even in the app, the Podbean app. You know, if you're listening to this on the Podbean app right now, all you gotta do is scroll down, and at the bottom right-hand side, it says message. Yeah, that's right. It's that easy. You can do it while you listen to the show, and you don't have to be interrupted. I'd certainly appreciate it, and it helps get this show, well, more views. As I continue to climb the top 10, so to speak, when you type in paranormal, there's 10 shows that come up, and I'm like number 8 right now. So what's keeping me from being higher is not as many comments as the other shows. I'd love for you guys to jump on there. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll just leave it at that. I know you guys are going to like, subscribe anyway. But, you know, sometimes you got to go that little extra mile. Oh, man. July 25th, 2014. July 25th, 2014. Now, why do I say that date? Because that was the date of the first ever episode of the Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast, and it was called A Cure for Cancer. And in this episode, I spoke about my father and his fight with his terminal, well, they said terminal illness. And yeah, I got to tell you some good news. Now, when I recorded that episode, Dad was already 5 years into his fight. And as you guys know, if you've been an avid listener to the show or you're new, I'll let you guys in. Dad actually got diagnosed with another cancer back in the fall of this year, or I should say 2018. And it was Hodgkin's lymphoma. Dad has been fighting that in and out of hospital. And you guys have heard me say on the podcast, he's back in hospital. He's in again. He's out again. He's in again. Because, you know, that type of chemotherapy they actually give you is very brutal on the system. But Dad's a tremendous man of faith. And he's a wonderful example of the power of God or the belief in something otherworldly, working alongside science, in my opinion, to see him get to where he needs to be. And he's just a beautiful example of the two being married. There's no doubt in my mind that I have heard some amazing things in my time. I've heard some wonderful things. When I think of memorable things, I remember when I won my first heavyweight championship wrestling belt, and I remember the crowd cheering over and over, "Johnny, Johnny." I remember that. That was a moment. I can remember hearing my little boy and my little girl crying for the first time when they were born. Those are some pretty crazy feelings and some pretty crazy sounds to hear. I can remember when my wife said, "I will." When we got married down in Dominican Republic, that was awesome because I remember the place was so quiet on the resort, and I could just hear her so clearly plain as day, and it was just, it really went really into my brain. But there's something I want you guys to hear right now, which is a new happy memory that I get to hear, and I was lucky enough to record it. And with my dad's permission, I want you guys to hear this. I suppose.
Okay.
You gotta leave it there for everybody else. So what was that sound? That is the sound of my dad ringing the bell at the cancer center. And what that actually means, that signifies the end of his treatments for Hodgkin's lymphoma. Dad rang the bell, and as of right now, he's no longer on chemotherapy. So let that sink in. 9 years from the very first episode this show came out till now. I can add a new thing to the list of some of the happiest things I've ever heard in my entire life. And I just want to say, for everyone who's been out there listening to this, don't give up. It might look bad now, but don't give up. Don't quit. It's not worth it. Keep going. Keep fighting. Have a little faith. My dad's a great example of that. A little later in the show, you guys are going to be joined by Elizabeth Wood, and we're going to bridge spirituality and science. I just love this guest, and I think you guys are going to really, really enjoy it. Elizabeth is my spirit animal. She's pretty much how my brain works, and it was just a joy to have her on. And I think you guys are going to really like that interview later in the show. We got Laura talking about some of the craziest animals on the planet. Oh my God. She even starts talking about like these hippos and these drug hippos and stuff. Oh my God. You're going to love Dr. Laura's lair. And of course, Betty is going to inform us about what Paddy's Day is really all about, but then take it one step further and put her own spiritual spin on it. So this is going to be great stuff. Before we dig into all that, though, it's time for the paranormal news.
Somewhere between the funnies and the obituaries is... Oh, yes. The paranormal news.
Okay. Not all my stories can be hunky-dory happy. And I gotta say this story because it needs to be said. And unfortunately, we lost somebody that's been with us for a very long time this month. One of the great exploration stories of our time is officially over. NASA declared its Opportunity Mars rover dead on February 13th, more than 8 months after the solar-powered robot went silent during a raging dust storm on the Red Planet. And a day after the final calls to wake Oppie went up, they went unanswered. I declare the Opportunity mission as complete, and with it, the Mars Exploration Rover mission complete. Thomas Zuckerman, Associate Administrator of NASA's Science Mission Directorate, said today during an event at the agency's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, in Pasadena, California. Opportunity roamed the Martian surface for nearly a decade and a half, covering more than a marathon's worth of ground and finding conclusive evidence that the Red Planet hosted large bodies of liquid water in the ancient past. The golf cart-sized rover and its twin, Spirit, also helped bring Mars down to Earth in the minds of scientists and lay people alike. Spirit and Opportunity have made Mars a familiar place to us all. The Opportunity Project manager John Callis of JPL told Space.com, a few months after the dust storm flared up, when we say our world, we're no longer just talking about the Earth. We have to include parts of Mars as well. Record breaker. Both Spirit and Opportunity kept roving long after their warranties expired. Yeah, we actually made something that worked for once. Spirit finally got bogged down in a sand trap in early 2010. As a result, the rover couldn't rotate itself to catch the sun during the approaching Martian winter and essentially froze to death. Opportunity avoided such pitfalls for 8 additional years, studying rocks on the rims of Earth, different craters, as well as the Meridian Platinum Flats. The rover put 28.06 miles, that's 45.16 kilometers on its odometer during those travels, more than any other vehicle, robotic or crewed, has traveled on the surface of another world for as long or as far. What an incredible journey, and what a captivating thing it truly was for us all. I think that little machine, that little rover, had the hearts and imaginations of people captured all over the world, and I think it's just an amazing feat. You know, we hear so much about how we destroy our planet, and we're horrible, and we're all murderers, and we're all this, that, and the other thing, negative. But you know what? We're pretty smart to do something like that, to put a small robot on another planet and actually know what another planet looks like. Did you hear the latest buzz in the news, guys? I got more news. Now that we're all depressed, you know, listen to Aerith's theme. I was like, if I put this to Aerith's theme, do you think there's any Final Fantasy fans out there that would just totally mark out? Oh, the Opportunity rover! It's like the robot you never knew you loved until after you heard it to Aerith's theme. So funny. World's largest bee has been rediscovered in Indonesia. Did you hear the latest buzz? A gigantic species of bee thought to have gone extinct has been discovered alive and well on a remote island. Now you ask me, that's awesome news. Known as Wallace's giant bee in homage to British naturalist and explorer Alfred Russel Wallace, who first described it in 1858, this gargantuan species hadn't been seen since 1981. Now, though, a team of scientists on an expedition to the North Moluccas Islands have revealed that the giant bee is still very much alive and well. It was absolutely breathtaking to see this giant flying bulldog of an insect that we weren't sure existed anymore, to have real proof right there in front of us in the wild, said photographer Clay Bolt. To actually see how beautiful and big this species is in life, to hear the sound of its giant wings thrumming as it flew past my head, was just incredible. With a wingspan of up to 6 centimeters, these rare insects build their nests inside termite mounds. It is hoped that the rediscovery of the species will lead to a renewed interest in protecting and studying the bees before they really do disappear for good. By making the bee a world-famous flagship for conservation, we are confident that the species has a brighter future than if we just let it quietly be collected into oblivion, said conservationist Robin Moore. And how many times, just this past summer, we had the whole Don't Kill the Dandelions campaign here in Newfoundland, where a lot of people literally went the entire summer without cutting their lawns so that we can keep our native bee population, well, buzzing. And, you know, it gives me hope because, you know, I know this bee isn't a cryptid. He's 6 centimeters long. I mean, it's not exactly huge, you know, it's, you know, maybe almost the size of a pencil, but this is a bee we're talking about. This is pretty big, and it's on our planet, on the ground. Does this give us maybe more hope for those cryptids out there that we can't find? One can only hope that, you know, these guys make a comeback, as well as all the other bees, too, because, you know, they're so vital, really, really vital to our food supply. Scientists have synthesized a molecular system that hints at a possible alternative to DNA-based life. Oh, man. You know, we've heard it time and time again, don't play God. So we just went ahead and did it anyway. NASA-funded research aimed to explore the theoretical foundations of life on other worlds by developing alternative ways to store and transmit genetic information. Led by Stephen Benner at the Foundation for Applied Molecular Evolution in Alachua, Florida, the team succeeded in fabricating a DNA alternative with 8 nucleotides instead of 4. The researchers named their creation Hachimoji, which is Japanese for 8-letter. By carefully analyzing the roles of shape, size, and structure in Hachime DNA, this work expands our understanding of the types of molecules that might store information in extraterrestrial life on alien worlds, said Benner. The work is an important step towards better understanding what types of life forms could potentially be out there, as well as where we should be looking for them all. In the future, the team may also be able to synthesize other, even more exotic genetic systems. Incorporating a broader understanding of what is possible in our instrument design and mission concepts will result in a more inclusive and therefore more effective search for life beyond Earth, said astrobiologist Mary Wojtek. Man, that's something. I don't know if we should be messing with that, to be honest. You know, you imagine something like double DNA, like, oh my God. I guess in my own heart, though, I kind of want Rocket Raccoon and, Groot to be real things. So, let's say you're, I don't know, in the jungle, just hanging out with your buddies, and you suddenly come across a dead humpback whale, it's believed to be 12 months old. And did I mention that you're in Marijo Island? Yeah, that's the Amazon. What the heck? The whale, which was discovered after scavenging birds were spotted flocking around its remains, could very well be the first humpback ever found washed up in the Amazon region. It was found in the undergrowth approximately 15 meters from the shoreline. According to the nonprofit Bicho do Agua Institute, the unfortunate seaborne mammal was likely already dead long before it arrived on the island. We're still not sure how it landed here, but we're guessing that the creature was floating close to the shore and the tide, which has been pretty considerable over the last few days, picked it up and threw it inland into the mangrove, said marine expert Renata Enum. Along with this astonishing feat, we are baffled as to what a humpback whale is doing on the north coast of Brazil during February, because this is a very unusual occurrence. Researchers have since taken samples from the whale in an effort to determine how it died. And here at the Odd the Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast, we're going to follow that story, guys, because that is really, really wild. But this isn't news. Whales have been beaching themselves for no reason. It just happens. And it seems to me like if this truly is weather-driven, as it gets colder, we're seeing our I can't really say little buddies, but we're seeing a lot of our native species winding up in different parts of the planet. It's a wild thought, really. It really is. We've had our share of snow here in Newfoundland. We really have. And I'll be honest with you, this year I feel like we haven't had that much. We get the scattered storm, but, I think we've been very lucky, very fortunate. I've only had to shovel a few times, and to be honest with you, with all the kids and the foster kids and whatnot, I usually just hire someone to plow her out for me. It's pretty much I have no choice if I'm home alone with 3 kids. Yes, you babies just feed and change yourselves. I have to go shovel for 4 hours. But you know what? Residents of the Kemerovo region in Siberia have been uploading images and videos of a very strange phenomenon recently. And it ain't white, it's black. Toxic black snow has been covering the streets in Siberia. The spectacle, which has been described as post-apocalyptic by Russian media, is believed to have been caused by toxic coal dust that's been pumped out of nearby coal mining facilities. It's harder to find white snow than black during the winter, said environmentalist Vladimir Silvak. There is a lot of coal dust in the air all the time. When snow falls, it just becomes visible. You can't see it the rest of the year, but it's still there. Some of the most recent footage shows piles of the black snow heaped up on top of cars and the roadside, as well as strewn across pavements, gardens, and even a children's playground. Suffice to say, the problem is not likely to be doing the local residents' health any favors either, as we all know that it can lead to many different health issues. And, you guys got to look this up. This is just really concerning. Like, oh my God, we got humpback whales, winding up in the jungles of Brazil, and now we have toxic black snow. You know what? That's it. I'm calling in the big guns.
Wind, water, heart, go planet! By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet! Captain Planet, he's our hero. Gonna take pollution down to zero. He's our powers magnified, and it's fighting on the planet side. Captain Planet, he's our hero. Gonna take pollution down to zero. Gonna help him put us on.
Guys, we had the Mars rover officially declared dead, the world's largest bee rediscovered, a DNA breakthrough that could change it all, the humpback whale found in Brazil, and toxic black snow. All these things have been horrible for the environment and odd to Newfoundland.
As they say, the power is yours.
And welcome to Dr. Laura's lair. Power on. Uh-oh. I'll get the broom.
Welcome to Dr. Laura's Lair for merch. This month, I'd like to talk a little bit about some crazy animals. And no, I'm not just talking about Igor and John.
Not funny.
Invasive species are species that are not native to a specific location. This type of invasion can damage the environment, other species, human health, and even the economy. Estimated damage and impact from invasive species is estimated to be more than $138 billion U.S. funds annually. For anyone who has done some sort of travel, you will know that you are routinely asked and search for non-native plants, fruits, veggies, and even critters. There's a really good reason for this. We will talk today about some of the worst case scenarios. Some things that make certain species really good at settling into a location that they haven't normally lived are that they grow fast, that they reproduce rapidly, that they can disperse quite well. They can alter growth to various conditions. They can tolerate a wide range of environmental conditions, and they can live off a wide range of food types. They're used to associating with humans, and that they've had previous success going in other areas. One example from the Great Lakes region is the invasive sea lamprey, which has thrived as an invasive predator. In its normal environment, it lives as a parasite, never actually killing its host animal. However, in the Great Lakes, this type of relationship isn't present. As such, this hungry little dude can eat a staggering 40 pounds of salmon and lake trout over its 12 to 18-month feeding period. This destructive buffet has actually had some negative effects on the fishing industry and has helped collapse the populations of some economy-dependent species. This little lamprey came into the Great Lakes via waterways by tagging along in shipping vessels. Rock snot, aka Didymo, is a single-cell algae which forms slimy mats and clumps that make rivers look polluted. It is native in some parts of North America, but it has moved into Vancouver Island where it wasn't before. Rock snot can change the growth of other algae and change types of invertebrates in the system. It isn't toxic, but it's still not a great thing due to its masking layers of, well, snot.
Chew. Sorry, master.
Few stories are actually as crazy as this one. So Pablo Escobar was truly infamous in the 1990s with an enormous underworld empire. He was one of the richest baddies of all time. Naturally, all good drug lords need a sprawling estate to host dinner parties for the cartel. It can be obvious that with so much disposable wealth, well, what's a drug lord to do? Buy a zoo, of course. When his world came eventually crashing down, many of his animals were rehomed. But unfortunately, the hippos found an unusual fate, one that actually impacts the local ecosystem in Colombia. 4 of Escobar's original hippos went rogue and have grown in both size and numbers. They now number from 40 to 50. Not surprisingly, these drug hippos are now a true tourist attraction. They have fanned out and formed little families in the region. The males struggle for dominance and have resulted in some hippo deaths.
Truly reminds
Igor,
me of my family and the muck spreading.
please get a
Yes,
hold
the
of
muck
yourself.
spreading.
And scientists are really working hard to study the hippos and their impact on the local ecosystem. Hippos are interestingly classified as what's called ecosystem engineers, since they move nutrients from one ecosystem to another. So like how salmons move ocean nutrients to rivers upstream. They help to fertilize lakes by eating grass on the land and, well, poop in the water, ultimately impacting microorganisms. The hippos really have fit in well in Colombia. However, the changes they make do put local species like manatees, turtles, and fish at a high risk. And the risk is really unpredictable, so scientists are focusing on studying this. It's truly a large problem. With this many hippos, they are very difficult to catch, and no one really wants that many hippos. And they can be very dangerous. In Africa, people are rightfully very afraid of hippos and will make decisions to avoid being in contact with them, like not going in rivers that they're in. The scary part is, in Colombia, the novelty has really resulted in the public having very little fear of the hippos. Also, there isn't much competition in Colombia for hippos. They don't have to go through the annual floods and famines, so they're really thriving and they're living their best lives, to quote Oprah. This all being said, there are some good things that can come from invasive species. The addition of new species can help increase biodiversity and add some variety to an ecosystem. One example of a positive case is the introduction of the tamarisk, which is a plant that was introduced to help the southwestern willow flycatcher. The southwestern willow flycatcher is actually an endangered species of bird, and the introduction of this plant has helped to support and develop additional required living area for these little feathered friends. Invasive species are something that need to be studied closely. Due to global warming, we are seeing changing in migration patterns and changes to movements and living areas of disease vectors like mosquitoes, for instance. It is critical we follow the introduction and change of species because it truly impacts all facets of any ecosystem. Back to you, John.
My ex-girlfriend said I had an ecosystem in my pants.
Greetings from Betty, your oracle, with words of wisdom for your consideration and enjoyment. Well, everyone, it looks like the month of March is upon us. It's marching forward. This month looks like she's coming in sort of like a lamb. Let's hope so. A lot of people feel that March is the longest month of the year. And then there's a whole other group of people who don't even realize that March is the longest month of the year, simply because they're excited about St. Paddy's Day. I made a huge mistake 2 years ago of saying just that, Happy Paddy's Day, to an Irishman. This Irishman was a friend of mine and a client for many, many years, and very Irish. And just for the sake of the recording, we will give him the nickname or the pseudonym of John O'Rourke. So, John walks in through the door on St. Patrick's Day, and I greet him with a very merry St. Paddy's Day, Mr. O'Rourke. Well, Mr. O'Rourke had on his bright green shirt, which I thought was unusual, because I know how Irish he is. When he heard me say St. Paddy's Day, his face changed completely. His whole physiology changed. He put his hands on his hips, and he looked at me. And very seriously, he said, St. Patrick was never Paddy. St. Patrick's Day in Ireland is a very, very holy day. So I asked him further. I wanted more information. So I asked him as a child, what was St. Patrick's Day like for him? And he said, as a child growing up in Ireland, he said, we spent all day on St. Patrick's Day in church. He said, in the evening, the adults would take to the drink. And he said, never was St. Patrick anything near green. There was no green beer. There was no green anything. And I said to him, that's very interesting, as you look like you're dressed for the occasion. And he looked at me very simply and he said, well, I'm in North America. And when in North America, you got to do what the North Americans do. And he said, it seems like they all do the grain. So that got me thinking, what has green got to do with St. Patrick's Day anyway? And from my vague recollection as a child, I remember hearing something about St. Patrick chasing snakes out of Ireland, and I thought, there were snakes in Ireland? Well, today I have found a really interesting website. 123dentist.com is the website. And he's got the history, or he or she, has the history of St. Patrick's Day here. And I really would like to read it to you because it's just so interesting. Most people celebrating St. Patrick's Day, and this is right from this website. Most people celebrating St. Patrick's Day this March 17th won't be aware of the true origins of the holiday or even its meaning. Aside from celebrating the Irish, the color green and whatever shamrock snakes are made out of, what is it really about? How did it evolve into the holiday we celebrate today? We wanted to take a look at the history and evolution of St. Paddy's Day, as he has it written here. And I'm going to correct him now, and I'm going to say 123 dentist, he's not Paddy, he's a saint, and he's St. Patrick. Hopefully give you and your friends some great talking points when you enjoy the green-colored beer at the neighborhood Irish pub. So in the beginning, right at the top, it's a religious holiday. And as John told me, yes, it's a religious holiday. Given the name of the holiday, it might seem obvious that St. Patrick was Christian, but most people associate it with celebrating Irish culture rather than Catholicism. Truth be told, that's not where it began. St. Patrick was a prominent bishop and missionary in Ireland near the end of the Roman Empire in the mid to late 5th century AD, known as the patron saint of Ireland and the apostle of Ireland. Patrick was instrumental in bringing the Roman Catholic beliefs to Ireland, and in subsequent years, St. Patrick's Day became a day to commemorate Catholicism in Ireland, hence the very holy day that John celebrated. Originally, it was a day of feasting and celebration held every year on the day of St. Patrick's death, although until the 1700s, the holiday didn't exist in any formal capacity. And that was another thing I wondered. When did it actually begin? So it began in the 1700s. Over the years, there has been a great deal of mythology of St. Patrick in history. So, let's begin with the business of the snakes. And this website says Ireland had no snakes. That's what I always thought. One of the more popular myths about St. Patrick's Day is that he drove all the snakes from Ireland after they attacked him during a 40-day feast. Legend says he drove all the snakes into the sea, and that is why there are no slithering serpents there today. We now know that there were never any snakes in Ireland. One writer hypothesized that the legends about the snakes actually served as a metaphor for Druidic symbols in Ireland and St. Patrick's eradication of the traditions that preceded Catholicism in Ireland. Sorry guys, first day with my new tongue. St. Patrick wasn't even Irish. In truth, St. Patrick was taken from his home, either in Britain, Wales, or elsewhere, and became a slave to pirates for 6 years. When he was freed, he entered the clergy and later returned to Ireland as a missionary to begin his work. While he was not in fact Irish by birth, He embodied the spirit of Ireland and a love for the country. Somewhat ironically, St. Patrick was an immigrant to Ireland, the same way so many Irish would later become immigrants to the United States, where the modern St. Patrick's Day was born. And the next part that I find really interesting, the color green. And I wondered, what's green got to do with St. Patrick? So the heading here on this website, green isn't that significant to St. Patrick. St. Patrick never wore green, according to most accounts. But he did use the Irish shamrock to explain Christian symbols and ideas like the Holy Trinity to his followers. The shamrock itself held meaning long before Catholicism made its way to Ireland, even in Druid rituals and stories. The significance was the 3 prongs, as 3 is the number with significance in pagan traditions. Green was a color associated with shamrock and certain groups in Ireland, and in the mid-1700s it fell out of fashion, replaced by blue, the color then most commonly associated with St. Patrick. It wasn't until another group of Irish Protestants rebelled against the British and reclaimed green as their symbol. Wearing the green came from a popular theme song for the rebellion and has been synonymous with Irish nationalism ever since. So all about this modern holiday, it's an American holiday. Well, Irish American, the very first St. Patrick's Day parade was held in Boston in 1737 as a celebration of Irish culture in the colonies. It later spread in popularity to Dublin and other American cities and is now popular in other countries, including Europe and even Asia. In Ireland, St. Patrick's Day is a national holiday and has been since the beginning of the 20th century. But the first parade wasn't held in its honor until the 1930s, and I don't think, in actual fact, that in Newfoundland, Canada, where we are, I don't think it is a holiday anymore, actually. In the mid-1990s, Ireland began to use St. Patrick's Day to promote tourism and cultural identity. Some say to reclaim the holiday from the United States, where it became a bit tacky with the green and the shiny green and the green. Others in Ireland and even in the US are concerned that the holiday has become too secular. Today, St. Patrick isn't much of a thought at all in our celebrations of the famous holiday. Mostly, we drink Guinness beer, enjoy dressing like leprechauns. Sure, there is a traditional Celtic music, dancing, and dress to provide some touches of authenticity, but those touches are largely absent in Ireland's own celebration. What St. Patrick's Day has now become is largely symbolic, although it's a great excuse to have some fun while spending time with friends. So that's the end of that website, and it's a very interesting website because there are pictures as well. But there are other things about the month of March and about St. Patrick and about all of these eclectic little holidays, little days that pop up through the year. Most people who know me know I love fairies. I have an affinity to fairies. I see them, actually, and some of them are, our Newfoundland fairies are similar to Ireland, but not completely like Ireland. And for that, I will send you to a lady by the name of Anne Brennan, who lives in Nova Scotia, and who did come to Newfoundland about 10 years ago and do a talk at Memorial University about the fairy folklore between Ireland and Newfoundland. Now, I've put her a video about that trip on my Facebook page, so you'd have to scroll down through because it's down a ways, and actually I may reshare it simply because of the holiday itself. What I wanted to talk about, and the reason I brought that up, was fairies, gnomes, sprites, elves. What are they all? So are fairies the same thing as leprechauns? And somebody said, oh yeah, they're exactly the same. Well, that's not what I've read. That's not what I know. Fairies are usually miniature or full-size people or beings. They bring messages and are guides or guardians. And that's why, especially here in Newfoundland, we have that folklore that says, now, don't you go across those barrens without some bread in your pocket or you'll be fairy-led. The fairies will lead you astray. And my mother-in-law used to say it all the time. And a lot of people still feel that way. I know that we have fairies dead smack in the middle of the city. Here I'm in Mount Pearl, Newfoundland, which is next door to St. John's, which is the, of course, capital city. And I know that all over this area we have fairies, and I know I have them in my garden. My daughter looks at me as if I have 50 heads when I say that. Oh, Mom, how do you know we got fairies in the garden? And I said, well, for starters, go out and look at the trees. And now that the trees have no leaves on them, now we can see the way their branches are growing. So if you put your two arms straight up in your hands, straight up to the sky, you imitate a tree, basically, right? If you stand up and you put your two hands up and palms, fingertips up to the sky, you emanate a tree. That's what a tree normally looks like. I have an apple tree in the center of my garden that was given to me by my father that is not growing like a normal tree. It is not reaching up to the sky. It is growing in a circular motion. That's how I know there's an energy vortex and there are fairies, simply because of the way the tree is growing. Now, what are leprechauns? Leprechauns are bringers of good luck, and they're much closer to dwarfs or gnomes, and they're also famous for their pot of gold. So, I don't know if we have leprechauns in Newfoundland. We may have. But as I said, I do know that we have fairies. Fairies can present as adults or can present as tiny, tiny, tiny little people. They can present as flickers of light. I've seen them everywhere. And in particular, myself and another group went to do a paranormal investigation. Of course, that's what John does, paranormal investigations. And we do paranormal rescues. So the very first thing when we entered this property, and it wasn't here in the city, it was outside the city, I could hear in my mind this very deep laugh. It was sort of like a ha 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 ha. That kind of laugh. I looked at one of the other ladies who was with us, and she was leading our group, and she nodded and she said, yep, I heard him too. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. She said, yeah, I heard him. And she said, he's big. And I said, he doesn't sound like he's very happy. She said, he's not. The house is right on his property. The woman who owned the house contacted us simply because her son, her young son, who was then 8 years old, saw a brownie, one of Newfoundland's, and I don't know, I'm not really sure if brownies are particular to Newfoundland, but I know that brownies they're called brownies for a reason, because they're very brown. They have long noses, long fingers. They don't have wings, long ears, and they're brown. Everything about them is brown. Their clothing is brown. And he was very upset. The reason she called us was that he saw this fairy hanging off this light fixture in this gorgeous brand new home that she had built. And she couldn't figure out what was going on. She called her grandmother and she said, Nan, why do I have fairies in my house? And she said, because, my dear, you built your house on the fairy path. So, what did we do with this big fairy who really wanted his family back? And that was all we knew. The lady who was leading the group and I both knew instinctively that what the problem was with this one big fairy, he just wanted his family. He wanted his friends back. So, we did the clearing. We did use all the necessary protocol to clear her space and to keep the fairies out. So we decided that this fairy we needed to bring to a park. It's very near the city. It's about halfway between her home and the capital city. So the girl who was driving the car looked at us and said, how do we get a fairy in the car? I said, we open the door and let him in. So we opened the door, and I felt him. He was big. And there was another woman in the back seat with me, and we were pushed for space. We were really pushed for space. So we got to the park where we were going to bring him, where we decided to let him off. And the woman who's driving again looks and she says, "How do we get him out?" I said, "He can get out through the window. Open the window." So we opened the window, and I could see him, and he reminded me of Shrek. I could see him back on, and he was dancing in through the gates of this park. I found my family. Unfortunately, the woman who owns the home won't go to that park anymore to camp because she's afraid he'll find her. And as I've told her, he's not interested anymore. He's found his family. Anyway, for those of you who are still listening to me ramble on about my fairies and leprechauns, I hope you have an amazing month of March. I hope this month brings you so much joy. We're coming into spring, and it's time. We've had a long, cold winter. Most of North America has seen a long, cold winter this year. So I'm going to sign off for now. For more information about me and my work, you can find me on Facebook, Betty Collins. You can find me on my Facebook business page, Betty Collins E-Factor, E-Factor. Or you can email me at BettyScottCollinsNLP, all one word, @gmail.com. Back to you, John.
Attention all Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn radio listeners. The Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast brings you the best in East Coast esoterica on the first of every month. Together, we can keep it growing by sharing the show on social media, subscribing to the show wherever you may be listening to it from, and by leaving feedback about your favorite episodes. John certainly needs a friend like you to help make his dreams come true, minus the alien abduction dreams. That is not cool at all. The Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast. Always available, always free, always odd.
And welcome back to the Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast. Do you think there's a bridge, so to speak, between spirituality and science? You know, so often spirituality and science are at odds with one another. They constantly conflict. But could there be a bridge built between them both? Well, I'm a living, breathing example of absolutely. And anybody who's been following this podcast for the last 5 years knows my dad definitely is a bridge between science and spirituality as he continues to defy the odds, beating his cancer with a little help from the man upstairs and the best chemotherapy, Trudeau's money bought for us. I can't say, money can buy. But that's beside the point. Tonight I have a really, really awesome guest. Someone who's going to help me, build a bridge, so to speak. She has a book out, actually two here, one called Healing the Three Minds. Brain, Heart, and Gut. You can get on Amazon.com. The other one is Building Your Business of Light. And that's available on her website, seerandscientist.com. Yeah, that's what I just said. Seer, as in S-E-E-R, and scientist.com. She's both. Tonight, I am graced by the presence of Elizabeth Wood. Elizabeth, how are you tonight?
Oh, I'm so excited to be included in your amazing podcast. Thank you, John.
I think the inner monologue of me is somewhat science and somewhat spiritual, and it conflicts constantly. And it's nice to know there's somebody else out there who's just as open-minded and probably as confused as I am by it all.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, you know what? I've got a pretty heavy question for you. Here it comes. Spirituality, science, you're on both sides. You're on the fence, so to speak. Or maybe you feel like they both need a bridge. Elizabeth, tell me how you got involved with all this.
Yeah, it actually started with that confusion. So when I was growing up, I could see all these different dimensions. I could talk to dead people. It was very classic. My mother, of course, was terrified. And and being able to see all this stuff, I got older. My father's a scientist. He's an ex-military. He did work doing geology, which is about as hard science as you can get. And so I was really interested in measurable results. My dad always pointed out, look, you can understand reality by finding 3D measurable results. And of course, I'd have, an angelic helper there saying something or another about, well, not everything is what it seems. So I wanted to know, how can I be like my dad? Because I really liked the science part. And I dug in. I went in immediately. I started college actually in high school. And so when I finished high school, I had a 2-year degree already. And I went right into science really deep. And I dug in. And I wanted to look for a way to understand why I could see what I could see. Because it seriously was not a mental problem at all. It wasn't an issue. It wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it allowed me to tap into knowledge and wisdom that was far beyond anything that myself or the other people around me could do. And so as I got into science, I started in psychology. That didn't really go very far. And then I got into sociology, and that still was too limited. But I found my niche in anthropology, where we could actually study humanity objectively. And that was the wondrous point of my life where I actually thought I could get some clear answers. So I dug into that. I got into predictive models and futurism. I got into theoretical work. I started to ask these deep questions. Can I prove that there is a scientific reason and an actual human reason for the fact that I see all of these different dimensions and other beings that are not human, basically aliens? And I really didn't find it in anthropology. What I did find was all this history around humanity being spiritual beings, first and foremost. And I remember at one point I was taking an archaeology test, and my angel's looking at my test and I had to put, how old is the human race? The answer that they wanted me to put in the academic setting was, at the time, 100,000 years old. And my angel's like, oh, that's so wrong, Elizabeth. It's 500,000 years. And I said, yeah, but we don't have any archaeological evidence to prove that yet. Well, lo and behold, just a couple of years ago, we found an actual Homo sapiens skull in Morocco, 300,000 years old. Completely blows open this history that we think we knew.
You know what my favorite anthropology joke is? I got to butt in. You know what my favorite anthropology joke is? We're only missing one missing link.
Missing one.
Oh my God, we're missing thousands.
Thousands and thousands. And a lot of it's buried in the etch-a-sketch of the earth, right? The sand, the water, all this is underneath, and we really barely scratched the surface. And then, of course, as we dig deeper, we find all this evidence that aliens have been here for ages too. So I just found that the science world, the academic world, was really amazing. It helped me with the history part. It helped me with the quantum physics part. And when I got into the quantum physics part, I was able to implement some of those concepts, such as quantum entanglement, into looking at human beings. And that's where we've begun now. It's sort of the seed, for me at least, into a brand new branch of thinking that we can call quantum anthropology.
Okay, so anybody out there, just let me throw this in there. For anybody out there, what she's talking about, really, I believe you're talking about spooky action at a distance, correct?
Correct.
The idea that there's actually something out there that's faster than the speed of light, which is instantaneous. And, to me, I think it's brilliant that you guys are there, because guess what? That's about as far as we got. I shouldn't say we. Dare I sit here with a board in front of me and try to be a physicist of any sort. But I will say that it's very interesting that that's where you guys are too right now, and rightfully so, because at the end of the day, we're seeing all these things in science, so many different things. My God. I mean, if I looked at you right now and I said to you that there's something in our universe that doesn't weigh anything, that can pass right through you, isn't exactly measurable, but has a color, you look at me and say, are you talking about ghosts? And I'd say, no, I'm talking about dark matter. This stuff exists.
Yeah, it is. It exists. It's measurable. And I actually believe, John, that in the future, we will actually have a name for this particle, and it's going to be a lot different than you think. I believe that we will name it love.
Ooh.
I think that this whole universe is based on an experiment. And that this experiment was to answer the question, what is love? And that all the other multiverses, of course, are based off of experiments as well. And certainly when you're discovering a concept so deep and broad and intense as love, you're going to discover what is not love. But it takes an entire universe to answer that question. And I think that particle, or this missing link in the quantum physics realm, is actually a wavelength of sorts, and it acts like light, in that when you have your consciousness focusing on this, it changes. Just like light wavelengths change with consciousness. So if an observer is observing a light wavelength or a light particle, it's going to change back and forth between a particle and a wavelength according to someone actually observing it.
Which would be double slit experiment?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Sorry?
Which would be the double slit experiment? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit lost here. Whoa!
I think that what we're going to find out is that this idea of love is so huge and so broad and is the binding force that has created this universe. And that's my postulation of the future.
So we always talk about stubbing our toe when we talk about theories. And, that's my little joke. Theory of everything is a toe, guys and gals. The idea that the inner mechanics and the workings of our universe and everything that's in it and everything that's held together and how it's moved apart, like, we basically know nothing. And what we do know is the equivalent of basically a great ape using a rock to crack open a nut. It's very basic. It's very in our face. It's what we can grasp and what we can measure and whatnot. But not too long ago, we finally got our little pat on the back, and gravitational waves are real. And, that has really, I mean, how many years did that take to figure out? 60 or something?
Yes.
Maybe longer.
I'd like to point out that, we think that we've had to create instruments outside ourselves to measure these realities, when in fact we have the most brilliant instrument ever developed, which is the body. And that the human body is a actual scientific tool, that you can use the body as a tool with your consciousness to experience real measurable results that prove that there is many dimensions of reality, and that's what we call spirituality. But this is a different mindset for science, to actually use the body like a measuring tool. Everyone is psychic, John. Everyone can feel energy, and everyone has intuition. These are the innate gifts of the body. And by using the three minds, the brain, heart, and gut, in tandem together, we can use the body like a tool all the time, constantly experiencing different dimensions. And of course, being able to see all those experiences manifested in the 3D.
Speaking of 3D, plus time. Okay, I gotta throw it out there. I gotta be a jerk and say 4 dimensions.
Right, plus time.
If you think time is real, I mean, it's up to you. Look, I'm not gonna talk about religion here today. It always kills me that the dogma that's following religion now is the dogma that used to follow science, and everything's completely different. And, Aristotle, yes. God bless his soul. If anybody wants to know the struggle, you need to research Aristotle. But I'm going to throw this out to you. Speaking of dimensions, do you think all this is pointing towards an extra dimension of space that we're not aware of? Because it seems to me there's a lot of stuff in especially with particle physics, stuff like that. Like, there's something missing here. And the only thing that would really quantify all those calculations, there's got to be something missing. Now, the idea that there's 1,000 different dimensions and all this stuff, like, I'm not going to go all Doctor Who on us here, but the idea that there's an extra dimension of space that runs parallel to ours that we're not aware of, our 3D world plus time, or 4D, whatever you want to consider it, is like a piece of paper in a binder, and there's all kinds of other papers, this idea that there's other things going on. Do you think that might be plausible?
Actually, I think very soon now we're going to end up throwing out the word dimension altogether and utilize the concept of scales of reality. And one of the binding pieces of those different scales of reality is qualities of light. We know that at an atomic level, when electrons move from shell to shell, they release photons. That means your carpet, your chair, your body is actually creating light. And I think that light is the binding force. Light is the piece that we often ignore. And that light is different at different scales of reality. It's something that we can really count on, though. This universe is constantly dealing in matters of light particles, light wavelengths. But that's also proof in the pudding that there's a higher consciousness, and I'm not talking about necessarily a concept of God. I'm talking about a source field, a very, very intelligent source field that can, for example, consider a question and suddenly, blam, there's a universe. I have no idea what kind of scale of reality that would take, but the source field is something that we know is true because of quantum entanglement, the fact that all particles were all once one at one point in time, and that we've had an intimate relationship with particles, 500,000 years across the universe. And that your thoughts and your ideas can have an effect on those particles. That's what quantum entanglement is about. And how can that be possible? I think it is that binding piece, that missing link that is love. I really want to treat love like a force. I want to treat love like something that we can talk about in an equation and understand light and intelligence from a different perspective. But it all really does come down to, well, what is your personal experience? Because for all of us, it always comes down to that. It doesn't matter what kind of teacher we have or where we learn things or what kinds of things we're going to unwrap. What happens in your personal experience? Like you mentioned your father going through this incredible experience. That is measurable results, man.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm very thrilled to say that as far as I know, I don't want to jinx it, but as far as I know, just Tuesday coming, and, by the time this podcast comes out, this could be months in the future, Dad will be, he's within year 10 now of chemotherapy for renal cancer. He was 4th stage when he was diagnosed. And he's one of the longest surviving renal cancer patients in Atlantic Canada. And
wow.
Yeah, like when people write their exams and stuff like that in pharmacological pharmaceutical school here in Newfoundland, guess who they write it about?
Wow.
Him, because he's been on so much stuff, right? But Dad's a very spiritual person. He's the most spiritual person I know. And to be honest with you, when I started the ghost hunting thing, I was a total atheist. I was the wet blanket who went out and told everyone, sorry guys, it's a bird. That was me. Sure. And now I'm the guy who's, there's something to all this. And that's why I wrote my book as well. I feel that that there's more than meets the eye to all this, and that science and, I am not going to say religion. I'm going to say spirituality, because there are many different religions out there, but they all have some common themes. I'm going to say spirituality and science. When it comes to those two things, the idea that they always have to be against each other, it doesn't really jive. At some point, they desperately need each other, actually. And, I happen to believe that, there are many examples in science of spirituality coming through. like you mentioned earlier, double slit experiment. Oh my God, something simple as the placebo effect. I mean, that's not normal. That's not, theoretically, that's impossible. We should not be able to think.
It's impossible theoretically, right?
Yes, right? Theoretically, right? And same thing with spirituality. I'm sorry, but at some point, math has to come in there. It's the universal language, right? And, you know, when we look into something as simple, like even a particle, a photon of light, okay? When we look at these little particles and stuff like that, I mean, their dimensions are absolutely perfect. There is a designer
Incredible,
here.
aren't they?
It's insane. And what makes me believe that there's someone at the helm, or you what people call it a god, or a massive force, something that at the helm. The one thing that really, Elizabeth, really makes me believe in that is not when we look up at the universe. It's when we look within these small particles and stuff. And, you know, I guess there's a little bit of spirituality there too. maybe Buddha had this figured out long before we did. But the idea that as you get smaller, things get less and less controllable. It gets downright spooky the smaller we go.
Yes.
And
yes, and that's actually how I function as a psychic. At this point, I call myself a professional seer and oracle. I'm above just using tarot cards. I don't need them. I can actually see people from across the whole planet and nail down exactly what's going on in their bodies and their emotional lives and their situations, help them move forward, give them the tools they need. And that's the thing is people say, well, how can you do that? How can you be so right on, even though it's thousands and thousands of miles away? And I point out, hey, at the quantum level, this field is all one thing. I'm just tapping into that. I move out of the way so I can be accessing that quantum field of infinite information. That's all. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just using my body as a tool. And who am I exactly? I believe I'm a soul. I'm beyond this body. And that my consciousness is actually functioning sort of like a being of its own living in the body. And that I animate the body and I use the body as this tool. So I kind of take this approach with people. I point them out to look at the body like a machine and treat it as such. But if people are curious about whether or not there's an intelligence behind the source field, well, all you have to do is look at DNA. DNA is incredible. It is a technology. And for example, one strand of DNA in a human being in one cell can contain more information than all the computers on this planet combined. That's mind-blowing. And I don't think that we can sit here and say, hey, there's not something intelligent behind this. By noticing that, it's wild.
One thing that always blows me away, I think there's lots of examples in nature as well of, very well-known. There's no doubt in my mind evolution takes place, but there's more than meets the eye,
Yes.
Oh my God. What? I'm brain farting now the name. I think they're called damselflies.
Right.
This bug that flies in the air and lands on another bug and lays its eggs inside this bug. And then that bug eats this other bug, but not all the way, just halfway, so it can still survive for a few weeks while the larvae incubate more, and then they hatch out of this other bug. That is not possible in natural selection because nothing would have gotten past the first bug.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. You're right.
There has to be, there has to be some kind of driving force there, and not only that, there's a lot of species on our planets, or our planet that are very similar to each other, but very different genetically. And that's another thing that fascinates. Like different types of birds, they literally look the same. But, when you compare their DNA, they're miles apart.
Totally different, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, and one of the theories that helped along this evolution piece, because it used to be believed that evolution was like this smooth sailing road, and that's not at all how it functions, is this concept of punctuated equilibrium, which basically says that change happens in big bursts. And I think humanity has hit one of those pockets. right now we're changing in a big, huge burst. And the face of our planet and our situation on this planet is going to completely change in a very, very fast period of time within a matter of years. So I'm really interested in implementing change and how we can actually be part of that and not feel so separated from that intelligent change that's going on within us and, of course, on the planet and throughout the whole galaxy. Because this is a galactic effort. It's not just us humans all alone on the planet. No, not at all. We're kind of like the United Nations of the galaxy right now. If people really knew all the different sorts of very highly intelligent, advanced beings interested in us and how they've been interacting with us for so long. And that full disclosure is going to happen sooner than later. I think Canada's way far ahead than, say, the U.S. at the moment. But we're going to get this full disclosure at some point. What is that going to mean for spirituality? How can any religion really be able to stay established when you're dealing with thousands of other highly intelligent extraterrestrial and so-called interdimensional beings? Wow, that's going to change the face of our planet and our beliefs. That's excellent.
Well, it's either one or the other. Either this is purely, either this world is purely a scientific type thing that came into existence and we're all a big fluke, but the building blocks are all over the universe, so there has to be life out there by definition, because there's literally infinite possibilities out in our universe. And then there's the other side of this where it was all made by a creator. And, you know, if a god or a god force made our planet, made our trees, made our waters, made the temperature differences that are so precise at the bottom of the ocean that, you know, certain types of phytoplankton can live 2 feet lower than the other species, but will die if they surface. Right? To be that precise, why the heck would he stop here? Why would he stop on one spot? Like, that's so silly. So either way, in my mind, there has to be something out there.
Yeah.
And I think this idea that, oh, well, you know, they're not going to be advanced as us is an ego thing. And then there's the other thing where they're going to be so advanced, more advanced than us. It's like, that's the chicken shit part of our humanity.
I agree with you. We have an equal place at the table, and I believe that every species has an agenda. And certainly we have our own, but to recognize that fact is very key. And you're right, the amazing quality of life that we can find deep in the oceans is really astounding. It's simply, I think, one of the best proofs we have that there's going to be life elsewhere that we can see that's 3D. But there's lots of life that's not even in the 3D. And that's something we actually can experience with these bodies and have measurable experiences with the body. And being able to see and experience those conversations with real intelligence beyond ourselves. I have learned so much more from the beings I've had interactions with than any academic setting combined that I've ever been in, and I was in school for ages. And I really think it's going to be special when we can open up to that and be willing to experience that.
Tell me a little tiny bit about some of those interactions you may have had. Was there any information passed on to you that you think is really important for my listeners to know? You know, the old adage that if you spend 10 minutes with somebody who's been doing something for 10 years, you're going to learn an awful lot. I'm sure you've had those interactions. Tell me a little tiny bit about, shall we say, the golden nuggets, shall we say, of your wisdom.
I have one. Yeah, I have a really good one. So at one point in time, I was doing a session for someone, and we opened up the session to say, is there anything or anyone else around who wants to put their input in? And here comes this fascinating looking being who didn't look anything like a human whatsoever. A lot of times, you know, you'll come across beings that look kind of human, like they've got a head and arms and legs, like a gray alien, for example. They kind of look kind of cookie cutter Milky Way star-shaped being. Well, this being didn't look like that at all. If I could describe it, it was sort of like you took a bunch of those starfish that have like 20 legs, and then you jam a whole bunch of them together, like hundreds of them together, and then they have basically hundreds and hundreds of little arms, but it was this beautiful dark blue color. And then behind it, it seemed to be sort of wearing this big disc of gold light or gold. So I was really confused. I'd never seen a being like this before. So I opened up and I said, welcome. May I ask who you are and where you're from? And this being said, well, I'm actually from Andromeda. And I had never met a being from Andromeda before, so I was all ears. And I said, well, what message do you have for us? And this being said, I want to describe to you the languages of the universe. So this perked my interest because as an anthropologist, I'm interested in linguistics. And this being proceeded to tell me that there's 3 types of languages in this universe. One of them is frequency language, which we're using now. So our bodies create frequency and then our bodies translate frequency. The second one is light language. So some beings that are often in other dimensions speak using light wavelengths. And that can actually be translated into sound wavelengths a little bit easier than, say, the third type of language. And I hadn't even considered this at all. This being said, there is a third language. It's called the language of orbiting. Everything is orbiting each other. Atoms are orbiting one another. Electrons are orbiting atoms. And then molecules are orbiting around each other. People are orbiting. Planets, galaxies, solar systems, everything's orbiting. And those orbits can be read like a language over time. And if you can learn and listen closely, or at least in this case, watch very closely the orbiting, you can actually understand what the possible futures might be of different bodies of reality and matter. But you can also determine what the past was. So they treat it like a language. I never even considered that being possible. It completely blew my mind. It changed everything in my mind. It made me realize that we are, in fact, dealing with incredible possibilities, that human beings just need an opportunity to be open to learning. And certainly that third language of the universe really blew my mind.
Well, I'm so glad that me and you got into orbit tonight. Guys, Elizabeth Wood, tonight we got to bridge spirituality and science together. She has a website, seerandscientist.com, where you can buy her book, Building Your Business of Light, which is pretty much for anybody out there who wants to have some kind of, shall we say, esoteric type business. Also, she has a book called Healing the 3 Minds, Brain, Heart, and Gut. You can get that at Amazon.com. Thank you so very, very much for coming on and just reinvigorating me tonight, Elizabeth. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you,
I love it.
You're amazing.
I don't know how I've known you some time before, probably in the past. You might be a soul group after talking to me. It's a strange soul group to be a part of. It's a lonely one, but you got a friend here in Eastern Canada. And to all my listeners out there, feel free to comment, like, subscribe, get in there on this interview. Check out Elizabeth's work, okay? seerandscientist.com. And comment. Give her some feedback. Guys, take care. And you take care as well, Elizabeth.
You too, John. Bless you all.
Well, the time to say goodbye is upon us. But don't worry, you can keep track of the Odd the Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast very easily. It's available on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, and TuneIn Radio. Just look for the Odd the Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast banner. Of course, if you'd like to keep up to date, you can always check out the Odd the Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast Facebook page, drop a like, and every single time a new show goes up, you'll be notified. You can also follow me, John Mallard, on Twitter, at ODDTONFLD. That's Odd to Newfoundland. From the oldest city in North America, I bid you adieu from the Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast.